So we know that part of corporate citizenship, we think about sort of the giving back in terms of funds, but the volunteer part is pretty huge as well.
Definitely.
I mean, you try to get a lot of your employees volunteering around the city and within organizations.
For sure. In fact, we have a pretty generous volunteer time off policy where we give our employees 16 hours of paid time off every year to volunteer, either in projects that we support as a company or projects that they're personally passionate about. So if an employee wants to volunteer for their child's school, maybe go chaperone a field trip, they can use the time for that. Or they can go to the Houston Food Bank with a corporate supported project and invest the time that way. But that's really one of the main ways that we often will initiate relationships with nonprofits that we previously didn't have a relationship with. Is a lot of times our employees are the ones who bring ideas to us about community partners.
How do you do your volunteer time?
How do I do my volunteer time? Well, it varies kind of depending on the organizations I'm involved with, but I'm on an allocations committee with the food bank, so I try to support them, and similarly on a committee with the Houston Area Women's Center, so they have a lot of different projects throughout the year. One of them is a back-to-school drive in the summer where we raise funds and supplies for 1,300 kids, so I take time off to help with that. So
very good.
Very good question.
Well, you know, I didn't
you have to walk the walk, or you're going to talk the talk.
So one of the questions I will often ask people sitting in your chair is, if you're writing a book, from your perspective on fundraising, so when people are coming to you at AIG as the head of corporate citizenship, you know, what is, in that book that you're writing on how to be a good fundraiser, what are some of the tips that you want to give? What are some of the chapter names that you might give?
Right. Well, I think the first chapter would be persistence pays off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of times it's challenging to get in the door of a corporation if you don't have maybe, you know, a direct line to the corporate citizenship director or, you know, someone in that office. And so I think finding some way to make a connection within the company, whether it's through an employee or an executive, and finding small ways to sort of plant the seed about what that organization can offer the company, and as far as what a mutually beneficial relationship might look like. And I know for me, a lot of organizations that we work with, we start off with a very small opportunity. Maybe it's just an employee volunteer project. A great example is the Ronald McDonald House. A colleague of mine who used to work at another nonprofit in development moved to the Ronald McDonald House, and we had not had a previous relationship with them. She did contact me, and we already had our budget set for the year. We couldn't really give any money, but she asked, well, what we could do a volunteer project? So we had a group go out and for 1 hour serve lunch to the kids at the Ronald McDonald House.
Wow.
And that kind of planted the seed. And then we had a lot of excitement from the employees who went, and now all of a sudden there's some momentum building. But that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, you know, we won't probably be able to give them money until next year because we didn't plan for it in our budget this year. But it planted the seed, and now when it comes to budget season, because there was that good experience and there was a person even that volunteered that wants to get further engaged and maybe you know, looking at more leadership roles within the organization, that really helps to sort of build that relationship so that next year when we're looking at our budget for 2017, maybe there'll be a place for them.
So the idea of persistence and of sort of building for the long run is quite important.
Exactly. So I think persistence is definitely a big chapter title. And then probably the second, and pretty close second, is relationship building. Maybe that's even tied because for me, you know, where there's so many nonprofits out there, and you know, a lot of times they're hard to distinguish between, and there's so much need, and we have so few resources that we can give out every year, that just having the ability to sort of build a relationship with the people at the organization is just as important as the mission. Because we want to give to organizations where we're confident not only that the mission is something that we believe in, but the people that are at that organization, we believe in, they're standing behind that mission, that we can trust them, and that we sort of have that sort of mutually beneficial partnership and understanding with each other.
Do you get tired of going out to lunch with people, sort of as people try to pursue that relationship with you?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I
would imagine that there could be too much at some point.
Yeah,
I mean, you have your favorites, I'm sure.
Right. Well, it kind of depends on the restaurant. I'm just kidding. Actually, you know, that's really not true. You're right. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, and taking that time out can, you know, take up a lot of your time if that's all that you're doing. And so I think you do have to be selective. And so I think A lot of times that I ask our nonprofit partners or potential partners is, to maybe consider having a first meeting at my office, or maybe meeting for coffee, or something that's a little shorter, that's less of a lunch commitment. Or maybe even finding ways to, part of that is just getting to accept the invitation to begin with. If it's a new organization that we've never met, then before I could ever agree to a lunch or a meeting, need to understand, what alignment is there between that organization and what our company is looking for in a charitable partner. And, sort of what's the return on investment? Because more and more our area is looking to deliver and offer a great return, just as any other department within AIG is expected to do with the money that they're investing, whatever they're doing. And so we have to show what's the business value. And so I think the most important thing that someone can do on the nonprofit side is to really do their homework on what AIG stands for, or what any company stands for, and find out, ways that their organization can then provide some type of benefit or service to the company in a way that provides us mutual benefit, because it's just not enough for us anymore to write a check.
Right.
We really have to show what's that bottom line value that we're offering.
And that's not just an AIG thing. We're seeing this across corporate givers all across the board. Right?
Exactly. I think more and more, the days of just writing a check are long gone. We're looking for multidimensional partnerships where there is a clear connection to our business. And that can look like a lot of different things. Maybe there is an opportunity for some diversity exposure, because diversity and inclusion is an important value of AIG. So maybe there's some training that nonprofit can provide to us, or maybe there's opportunities for our employees to go out and have a real exposure to some diverse communities or environments they may otherwise never have known about, and then they can sort of bring that back to the workplace. So it doesn't always have to be directed to the business like someone might expect. As an insurance company, there's only so many ways an organization can align with us. But looking at what is an angle that someone could take that would make sense for us as a business.
We hear a lot of questions about, who do I put on my board? So let's say that someone wants someone from AIG on their board, and they want to use that as a conduit to getting sort of more support from AIG.
Right.
Can anyone from AIG serve that? Does it matter who that person is on the board from AIG? Let's say I'm a small nonprofit, so I put an accountant from AIG on my board. Does that help me get AIG funds?
It can help. It's certainly a great starting point. And we have a pretty generous matching grants program. And so hopefully that nonprofit is asking all their boards to give 100% across the board. And so our matching grants program matches on a 2-to-1 basis up to $5,000. That means that organization could get up to $10,000 from AIG right off the bat without us really even having to do anything. Just from that one employee board member's maybe personal investment of, let's say they decide to give the max of $5,000. So that's a great way to sort of get on our radar and to, get some engagement with us. And then hopefully that board member would then approach my office about looking at what are some opportunities beyond this board membership, assuming that the organization's in alignment with our areas of giving, which are safety, security, and disaster relief. So that's sort of an important piece. But at the very least, we try to have that matching grant program, which will match almost any nonprofit or educational institution, as a way for our employee board members to at least get some money from AIG, assuming they're making their personal investment, which we hope they would be.
Now, Jen, where did you grow up yourself?
I grew up right here in Houston, actually.
You did?
Yeah. Born in St. Luke's Hospital, and when I was about 5, I moved down to Friendswood, just south of the city. But yeah.
And where did you go to college?
I went to Texas A&M for my undergrad and Boston University for graduate school.
Very good.
Yeah.
And how did you end up doing the work that you're doing at AIG?
Well, I think it all started at Texas A&M. I started getting really involved with community service, and but I also had an interest in public relations, and we had a United Way student chapter there, and I started doing public relations for them. And I just love the work. I love being able to be engaged in the community, but also figuring out how to sort of highlight and showcase the great work that we were doing through United Way and get other people kind of excited about it as well. And so at the time, I didn't realize that in the corporate world, there was actually maybe a role that, where I could serve sort of both of these passions of mine, sort of that, nonprofit and community engagement piece, but also wanting to sort of play a role in how to positively promote an organization and really get people interested and invested in it. And so right out of college, I did an internship for a local bank, Northwest Bank, which is now I think Green Bank, and worked in their marketing and public relations department. And I ended up doing a lot of their community projects while I was there. And from there, I started researching graduate schools where I could get trained in public relations, but also community relations. And Boston University had a great program, and was able to take a lot of public affairs classes and community relations classes, investor relations, and really kind of get the skills and tactics I needed to sort of back up my passion around it. And so it was in Boston during my second year of grad school where I did an internship for a financial services company there called State Street, and ended up working for them for 10 years for their foundation. And
in Boston?
In Boston, yeah. So really, it was that personal passion from pretty early on, and I've been doing this work for the last 19 years.
Wow, and how long have you been at AIG?
I've been at AIG for 8 years.
Wow, so you've been there a little while then.
A little while, yeah.
And through thick and thin, right? I mean, AIG has had a little bit of a roller coaster.
Just a little bit, yeah. Shortly after I started in June of 2008, I started noticing our stock price kind of taking a nosedive, and then, as probably most people remember, financial crisis of 2008, I think, started around October. And it was kind of touch and go there for a while. And
was it hard on the corporate giving side? Obviously, there's funds have dried up, right, for giving.
Yeah, it was a really interesting time because we not only were instructed not to give any more money, our stock price was at pennies, and but we didn't want to have our association with our charitable partners reflect negatively on them, because there was so much hate, and there was a lot of misunderstanding too around what AIG was involved with during that crisis. We had people picketing our offices, and a lot of hate phone calls.
Didn't they take AIG off the building in New York even?
Yeah, they took it off our building in Houston and New York. We were not allowed to wear logos of the company on anything. And so it was a tough time, and we actually had to write a letter to all of you. You may remember getting this letter, but we had to send out communication letting everyone know, all of our charitable partners know that, we weren't able to provide any funding for the next year. And, we still...
It was a sad day.
It was a sad day, yeah. And, so the one thing we did decide to do, though, was, we knew we couldn't give out money, but we still wanted to maintain those partnerships. And so we tried to be creative and find other ways to support our charitable partners, whether it was through employee volunteer projects, that we were heavily promoting at that time. We had a series of suites at some of the local sporting stadiums. So we were able to donate those to some of our partners to use to, share with their donors or potential donors. And, really just try to get creative with how we could still maintain some contact and relationship without giving money. So it was tough, but I think that, we just try to address it head on and be very open with our partners so that they could at least prepare. Because, to go from getting some form of a sizable donation from us to nothing could be really impact a lot of the organizations, especially the smaller ones.
A lot of times in running a nonprofit, and we're looking for a new director of development, there'll be people that come from the corporate side, people that are in the equivalent of your job at other places.
Right.
If you're on a board, or if you're advising a CEO, is someone who's been in charge of corporate giving a good person to hire as a director of development?
I think so, because I always look at these roles as sort of interchangeable, because I've often had people on the development side come ask me about my job, and as we start talking about what they currently do, what I currently do, I mean, the skill set to me is basically the same. It's all about being a good communicator.
Relationship building.
Right, relationship building, knowing the community, knowing what the needs are, knowing who the key players are. And so I really feel like most of the skills are very transferable across both jobs, in my opinion. Now, of course, I've never been a fundraiser myself, although I've been on some boards during fundraising and certainly know a lot of fundraisers. And quite honestly, I think it's a harder job. To be a fundraiser? To be a fundraiser.
More
definitely.
Pressure,
a lot, definitely. I mean, giving away money has its own share of headaches, but I think that it's a tough job because there's so much competition. I mean, it's tough to make those choices from my side of the table, but can only imagine the competition that exists on the other side of the table.
So we've talked about persistence and relationship building as sort of good traits for a fundraiser in dealing with the corporate community.
Right.
But as you look at your fundraiser friends and your people that you know within the fundraising industry, and you're looking at high-performing organizations that have become partners, what are the things outside of persistence, and maybe we could elaborate on the development of relationships, but when you see those really great partners for you at AIG, what are you seeing that's maybe different than from those that aren't?
Right. Well, I think the one thing that stands out to me the most is this sort of ongoing communication, really keeping in touch with us throughout the year, not just that one time of the year when it's time to reapply for a grant or ask for a sponsorship for an event, but really keeping in touch with us and letting us know how things are going throughout the year. And also sometimes I think something that's been helpful is engaging us in conversations about the organization itself, whether there's strategic planning going on, maybe pulling me or a colleague into a meeting to ask, what our opinion is. And we're really kind of more invested in the organization, not just from, writing the check, but also really having a voice at the table with sort of the direction of the organization and the strategy that it's taking. And just maybe even being thoughtful about maybe new and creative and unique opportunities that maybe are beyond what we may have been doing together the last couple of years. So, we always appreciate sort of those fresh ideas because we're always looking for those ourselves. We want to keep the partnership fresh and make sure that it's still relevant for us, for the organization. And so I think kind of that ongoing dialogue to me is really important. I mean, and it goes back to the relationship building and the relationship maintenance.
We had a discussion about this a couple of weeks ago where it was someone from a foundation talking about sometimes nonprofits think of this as a transactional, like, what do I need to do to get this money?
Right.
But what a lot of people really want is sort of thought partnerships, right?
Right.
Where we're all working in this together. How do we make you as our funder, or as one of our funders, sort of a partner in all of this?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that really is key, because we want it to be a partnership. We don't want it to be, just us giving out the money. We want to find ways to have those sort of multiple tie-ins to an organization where we really feel like there's value on both sides.
Now, the students that are taking this class also are taking classes with Brian, and so we know that you love the food bank, and we know that you love Children at Risk. But outside other organizations, there are other organizations sort of in Houston that you think of, wow, that's a good example of a high-performing organization.
Right. Well, one that comes to mind that we've been involved with for a long time is the Susan G. Komen breast cancer organization, which I'm sure most people know about. And the reason they come to mind is because they have done such a good job branding their organization and really being able to engage so many people. And so for us, from an employee engagement standpoint, they've really found a way to tap into the passion of a lot of our employees. And so, they have great toolkits. They make it very easy to be involved, both as a corporate sponsor, but also for our employees who get engaged. And so we really appreciate any organization that makes life easy for us, not just sort of from the corporate investment, but also when we engage our employees. Another organization that comes to mind is Junior Achievement. And similarly, they make things so easy. Once we kind of establish what the partnership will look like for the year, then they have sort of this turnkey, operation where we just sort of plug in. They let us know the dates that our employees can volunteer in schools or in their, one-off projects, and they really do all the work, all the legwork, which makes it very easy because most companies, someone in my position, there might be one person or a handful of people, but like any organization, and there's just never enough people to do the job you really want to do. And so we really do rely on our nonprofit partners to sort of play a role in helping us to make sure that our partnerships are successful in the projects that we're involved with.
Do you ever see nonprofits that you think, wow, what a great mission? We would love to be partners with them, but they don't seem to be doing anything right. Do you ever see that? I sometimes see nonprofits like that.
Definitely. Yes. And I think
you don't have to name names, but
no. Well, it's interesting. I actually joined the board of one that came to us about probably 6 or 7 years ago with a really great idea and a concept, and it was a smaller nonprofit, but the founder and president of the organization was so passionate and had such a great vision. And I really just felt like, this person is onto something. And I really see how we as a company could add value to this organization, even though they seem a little disorganized.
Yeah.
And even though I feel like, it's not a perfect situation that we would normally take on, I think there are those organizations sometimes where you can kind of see, with a little bit of finessing, with maybe getting a few of our folks involved that maybe have some professional expertise that the organization might need, maybe doing some pro bono consulting.
I think we even tried to help that organization.
Yes, I think so, yes. Yeah. And so, we ended up becoming a partner with them. And it was a great relationship for several years, and it was sort of a risk that we took, and it's not something that we would take all the time. But I think there are those organizations, those smaller startup nonprofits that have found sort of a unique way to look at a really big problem and a different lens to look through it at that hasn't been done before, that could potentially be a really successful solution. And so I think that while we don't always take on those opportunities, that they're worth exploring.
Yeah, very interesting. When you think about your life and doing the work that you do, I mean, what are some of the most rewarding? Is it the obvious things of sort of finding great organizations and seeing how your money really helps them, or what are some of the real rewarding parts of your job?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, yes, like seeing the big picture of how our investments have made a difference is rewarding. But I think sometimes that's hard to really know because we are one of many investors and we're not always funding a project on our own. It's a lot of people involved. I think at the end of the day, knowing that we have had established a strong partnership with an organization that is having a level of impact, not just for them, but for our company and our employees, where we can really feel good at the end of the day about, making some level of difference and then being able to pass that on to our employees and our shareholders to let them know that, AIG is, for all the negative things you may see and the press, that there's actually some really great work happening. People are going above and beyond their jobs, getting out in the community, rolling up their sleeves, or using their intellectual talent to make a real difference. And, there's little stories that we hear that don't, really summarize the overall partnership, but maybe it's just a connection that an employee made with a client. Or maybe it's just an experience that someone at the nonprofit had with one of our employees that maybe gave them some consulting help. And it just made the difference. And so I think it's sometimes those little things that make me the happiest, aside from knowing that the overall partnership is successful.
Well, AIG has made Children at Risk very happy over the years, and we've had some wonderful partnerships, so it's been a good thing. Let me go to the Twitterverse.
Okay.
So Sherry Cavallari wants to know, what's your best means of communicating with the community? What is it that you guys do that you feel like, wow, we really get a response from the community?
That's a great question, because I think that it's sort of an area we struggle with, quite honestly. We just over the last few years started trying to tell our story in the community a bit more. I mean, we went silent during the financial crisis. Prior to that, we were never a company that really was very outspoken about communicating with the community and what we did. And so it's really only the past few years that we've really tried to think about, we need to tell people what we're doing. And so, like most companies, we've really tried to get more invested into social media through Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And honestly, our most positive and well-received posts are all of the community posts. And so we've talked to our social media team. They really want to actually increase those because those seem to be the ones that people respond to the most. And then honestly, we do the press releases and probably the generic kind of communication, but we have a lot to learn in this area. And quite honestly, the way that we like to get the word out about what we're doing the most in the community is having our partners communicate it on our behalf. So, because that often feels more authentic to community members to hear about what we're doing through the voice of a nonprofit partner.
And there are some corporate givers that are really sort of adamant about that, right? How much did you publicize us and where, and let's see pictures.
Right.
So some are, you guys aren't as strict as that, but we see that often though.
Definitely, and I think in some of our larger partnerships, we actually make part of our investment, like we have a global partnership with Junior Achievement, And $25,000 of that investment was to create a public relations toolkit that all of our different offices that participate in junior achievement and globally use that toolkit, and each JA local office is asked to do something out of that toolkit to help promote our partnerships. So we are moving in that direction, but it's still an area we're exploring.
Is there a corporate giving group at some corporation around that you think they're very good, that you would name, that you think, well, they do an exceptionally good job?
Well, Bank of America always comes to mind because I just feel like, part of it is, I think, just the nature of their business. They need to be out there. But I feel like they do a very good job in kind of promoting what they stand for. Citigroup is another one. Who else do I really respect? I mean, there's a lot of companies that are doing it right. Those are the two off the top of my head that I feel like, I see them everywhere.
Right.
They're always showing up.
And in different ways, right? They sort of show up in different ways,
exactly.
which is sort of a nice thing. So,
exactly.
Yeah. I have been to many sporting events with the Bank of America at the Bank of America seat. So
exactly.
Robin Johnson wants to know, what kinds of decisions in your role are the most difficult for you to make?
That's a great question because I feel like I say no all the time. And so, saying no is always challenging because we get so many great requests in. But I guess when it comes to a difficult decision, probably the hardest decisions that we have to make are when we have longtime partners where we're really not able, where it doesn't make strategic sense to continue the partnership. Because, and a great example of this is the United Way. For 40 years, Aiji participated in the annual United Way campaign here in Houston and also in many other locations across the U.S. And about 5 years ago, the corporate-wide decision was made that we would no longer participate in that campaign. And we had, employees who are board members of United Way. We had, thousands of employees who are giving. And so that was a really tough decision because we had such, a long-term relationship with them.
Yeah.
But just strategically for us in the direction we were moving, it no longer made sense. And could totally understand it, but it's still hard to make those decisions.
Especially with long-term partners.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, I can see that. Francisco Aldana wants to know, how involved or connected is AIG with grassroots organizations that may be marginalized by others, sort of some of these grassroots type groups?
Unfortunately, we're not too involved, mainly because we have a very limited budget. And so for us, and also having a limited staff, we really rely on sort of, the more long-tenured organizations who have a proven track record. Because we don't have the time to invest in really getting to know some, a newer grassroots organization, unfortunately, that's just the nature of where we are and the resources that we have. We just don't feel like we can take that risk very often. That said, we do get involved with some grassroots organizations through our employee volunteerism.
Right.
So sometimes that's a way for us to get to know.
So going back to what you talked about earlier, getting volunteers and maybe a slow build would be a way to go,
Exactly,
right?
and then maybe a champion within the company rises up and we get
Put
more
someone
engaged.
on the board, your board. Yeah, absolutely. Jordan Klein wants to know, what is one of the most creative projects that you've worked on and was it successful?
Okay, creative
This is
project.
thinking on your feet.
Okay, yes. Well, actually, the project that comes to mind is at my last company at State Street Financial Services in Boston. And during the time, there was a huge youth violence program. The youth violence that was going on, kids were dying every week. And really, they were looking at it as, a health problem for the city. And it was also kind of a very controversial issue, too, that a lot of companies were afraid to touch. But State Street, as a company, we felt like, this is something that we really need to step in. We can't stand by and watch this happen. And so we created a collaborative, and we invited all of our peer companies to come together for an initial kickoff. We need to talk about it from a corporate perspective and really talk about why it was important as companies that we invest in this. And this is sort of the end of my time there, but the collaborative took off and is something that's still running today.
Wow.
But what I think was unique about it is that, it's not often I think that a company will take on a sort of a controversial topic. And I really love when companies can collaborate and sort of not feel like they have to own something. And that was the point of this, collaborative, that no one company would sort of own this, that it would be a shared responsibility.
Wow, very nice. Now, which boards do you serve on right now?
Well, I'm currently not on any nonprofit boards. I'm on the Greater Houston Partnership. I'm chairing their Women's Business Alliance. And I'm on
I've had a few questions about the Women's Business Alliance.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm on a committee with the Houston Food Bank and the the Houston Area Women's Center. So those are my main 3 engagements right now.
So Jen Lou Cook wants to know, how do you manage to chair such an important role and then also do your job at AIG? Is it pretty compatible?
Sometimes, because sometimes I feel like it's an occupational hazard, my work, because I have the personal passion and I have the relationships that I build that naturally lend themselves to invitations to join boards or committees or chair events. And so it is a little hard sometimes to pick and choose because there's so many great causes to get involved with. But I think for me, I've tried to just be very particular, just from what I want to do personally when I choose to get involved, because it's not just my own time, but then it's the company's name behind that, and I want to make sure that whatever I pick, that it's something that I can really commit to, like 110%. And so, but it can be tough because there's a lot of great opportunities that come up. But I also want to make sure those opportunities are shared throughout our company.
Sure.
And I don't want to be the sole person taking all of those on, because it is tough to balance sort of that extracurricular involvement in the community and the day job, as I'm sure everyone in your class is aware, so they're probably doing it too.
John Bogucki wants to know, how do you measure AIG's impact on local communities?
Well, not well, honestly. This is a topic that I think most of us in the sort of the corporate community engagement space really struggle with, because first of all, you have to figure out what is it that you want to measure, and then how are you going to measure it. And honestly, right now for AIG, we are just, doing all we can just to run our charitable giving program and, have the relationships that we have and manage the money that's going out the door. And so, unfortunately, for better or for worse, the measurement piece, which should be the top priority, gets pushed under the rug, and it's not what we want, but it's just sort of the way it happens. And it's something that we talk about all the time, and we talk to our peers at other companies about. And there are some companies that have figured out it much better than we have. But right now,
and there's some areas of the community that are easier to have a metric on than
that's
others.
true. Yeah. Well, that's true. And for some of our larger partnerships, like I mentioned, the global partnership with Junior Achievement, we actually do work with them on some really detailed metrics and reporting. But unfortunately, for our smaller or medium-sized partnerships, we just don't have that bandwidth. So we really, right now, we're just limited to some really big partnerships.
A couple of years ago, because we do so much measurement at Children at Risk, Shell hired us to come in and teach they brought in everyone that they give money from all over the country. They brought them to Houston. And we taught them how to do metrics. And it was amazing that so many were doing metrics like how many people have we served, when Shell really didn't care how many. I mean, they cared, but what they really wanted to know, what was the impact?
Exactly.
How have you changed lives? And it was interesting to deal with this. And, because so many people, you want to, as a giver, you want to measure, but so many people who are getting the funds and doing things don't really know how to do that measurement.
It's so true. I think we may have to hire you.
Well, let's wait until the finances are. So Edith Rahamian wants to know, this is a good question, how much autonomy do you have in your role when it comes to outreach and giving? Right.
Well, right now, I can pretty much approve anything that's less than $25,000. We just have to have a business leader sort of sign off on it. But anything more than $25,000, we usually have to work with our corporate compliance department. on.
That's quite a bit of autonomy, though.
Yeah, it is. And again, I don't have complete autonomy because we have, a
You're
senior
have a line
person
of
in our
people asking
business.
for $25,000
Right.
now. So.
Exactly.
So Moises wants to know, how does corporate citizenship and its values correlate with the nonprofit community? From your perspective, do you feel like you're on the same page as the nonprofit community?
I think more or less. I mean, I guess every organization is different, but I think that the majority of our partners, especially, compared to when I first started in this work, really have a business mindset. They operate their nonprofits as businesses, and so I think they can appreciate a lot of the different issues that we're going through and that we're looking for as far as what makes sense for, partnerships. So I think that I've definitely seen, a lot more alignment than there used to be. I feel like it used to be sort of like night and day, and now I feel like we're really coming together because, you do a great job of running Turnout Risk like a business, and kind of helps us to speak the same language.
Yeah. So we've lost our internet connection, which is interesting.
Okay.
But so let me ask you, so many times when we have people here, they talk about when you're selecting organizations, they look to make sure that you're in sync. You talked about me, but that you're in sync with the leadership. Like you want to make sure that there's good leadership.
Right.
How important is that for you guys as you guys are selecting?
Well, I think that's critical because, as I was talking earlier, we're making the investment in the mission, but we're almost at the same level making the investment in the people that run the organization. And we want to have a really good feeling that the leadership of that organization, is solid and that their organization is going to be stable and flourish. And of course, my relationship usually starts with the development staff, but I think it's equally important when possible to have that relationship with the head of the organization. Certainly not expecting them to be at every meeting, but I think, having an understanding of what the leader stands for, what their approach is, what their long-term view is for the organization, and even how they view their partnership with their donors, to me is really important because we have like the finite resources. We want to make sure that, we're accountable for them. We want to make sure that the investments are solid, and it starts with the people at the organization.
Yeah. Last week we had a big special event, right? And AIG was one of the honorees, and one of the chair of our board, who's an AIG senior officer, was honored. I wonder, because we've talked about special events a lot here, and there's definite feelings about whether special events are a good idea or a bad idea.
Right.
And we certainly make a lot of new friends. But from your perspective, do you like the idea of sponsoring events, or would you much rather give monies straight to the organization?
Yeah. I think there is still a place for special events. I think, though, at least from our company's standpoint, we have definitely dramatically increased the number that we support. Partly because when we have limited resources, we want them to go directly to the organization and find ways to partner that we can still, promote the AIG name, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, a logo at an event. That said, I think there's definitely value in these events because for us, we often will bring our clients or other nonprofit partners or employees, and it's a great educational opportunity for them to, in a short period of time, to really get a better understanding of what the organization is about and how they could potentially get engaged. And so I feel like they're necessary.
Yeah.
I think, we definitely want to make sure that our partners are still making, decent amount of money for the organization, and that the overhead of the, and the cost of the event is not so much that the organization's not getting anything back from it. And I think that when we look at, our total investments, we would rather have the majority of our investments going into programming and operations versus a special event.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a strategy a lot of my peers at other companies are taking as well.
I think that's right. I think not making sure that there's still a visibility, and the events are important, right? But the fact that you don't want, most of the investment to go towards the event. You want it to go towards the organization.
Exactly.
Okay, so now it's time for a few fun questions, Jennifer.
Okay.
So your favorite restaurant in Houston?
My favorite, it's such a hard question because there's just so many great
Well, you
restaurants.
can give us a couple. That's okay.
But I think one of my favorite go-to places right now is North Italia.
Oh
in
yeah, a lot of
Post Oak.
people like that place.
Yeah, I don't know why, but they have good pizza and great wine, and so that's a favorite. I went to B&B Butchers a few weeks ago and really enjoyed.
That's not far from your house
Yeah,
either.
it's right down the road from me, so it was a nice little kind of more of a special occasion, kind of good steak place. Gosh, there's just so many.
Yeah,
but
those are good
sometimes
places.
nothing's better than I love a good burrito from Freebirds. So the tastes go across the board.
Aren't they from College Station? Is that part of the? Yeah. Is there a favorite little hidden venue in Houston that maybe a lot of people don't know about, or place, or park? Or?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how hidden this is, but I love going to Bayou Bend and the I'm a Hog House and Gardens. It's right down the road from me, and I feel like it is a bit hidden in that when you go there, it does not feel like you're in the center of Houston. You can really see some of the beauty of the bayou and sort of the trees and the landscape around that area. And so I love going there, especially this time of year before the weather gets too hot. And then I love to go next door to Brenner's on the bayou.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a great, backyard and grounds there too. And they have a great outdoor bar, Blue Bar, where you can sit outside and have a drink or have brunch out on the patio, and it's covered. And it's just
That
really
is sort
nice.
of a good little secret place. I mean, I love it there, but it always seems a little empty, but it's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. So I like it.
And I love how the whole bayou, I mean, there's so much going on the bayou. I don't know if you've been to that Dunleavy for breakfast.
Have, yes.
It's another sort of little place that not a lot of people are going to, but I think they will be. Cause it's so
the line
wonderful.
has been out the door the last few weeks.
Oh, on the weekends, yeah. I've only gone on the weekdays. So, and when they make the Jennifer Waldner story in Hollywood, who's going to play you? Who's the most likely person to play you in Hollywood?
Oh, gosh, that is a great question. Many years ago, when Friends was popular, people often commented that I had a resemblance to Jennifer Aniston. Not probably how I look necessarily, but we had the same haircut. She had a very popular haircut, and I had the Jennifer Aniston haircut. So I've always kind of thought, yeah, she could play me. We share the same name, similar hairstyle.
Very good. Well, thank you for all the work that you do in the community, and thanks for coming to the class and speaking tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. This is great, and we really at AIG enjoy our partnership with Children at Risk. So thank you for all you do, Dr. Bob.
Oh yeah, thank you. So thank you guys very much. Another edition of the Nonprofit Leadership Studio, and we will see you next time right here in the studio.